going on, guys? Welcome to Everything Always. My name's Michael Roman. Hopefully by now you've had a chance to see the 6th episode of WandaVision. If not, spoiler warning, we're going to go scene by scene, act by act, break down all of the Easter eggs and narrative plot points. In last night's episode, there were a ton pointing directly to the X-Men, the future of mutant kind in the MCU, possibly the future of the Avengers, and of course, more setting up the villain for the future of this series. We're going to break down everything episode 6, but first, if you could grab the subscribe button. We're still giving away a PlayStation 5 at 800,000 subscribers, as well as Disney Plus subscriptions. We'll even announce some new winners at the end of this video. If you want to be entered to win, all you have to do, hit the subscribe button, then leave a comment down below, and if you want, stick around at the end of the video. We'll get into all the giveaway stuff again there, and again, announce some brand new winners. Now, of course, the first Easter egg in all of these episodes is the opening sequence itself, letting us know now that we're squarely in the early 2000s, both the opening sequence and most of the episode predicated on Malcolm in the Middle, which ran up to 2006. Now, on top of that, while they were giving us the credits in the opening sequence as to who's who, Pedro Maximoff, in a moment that made me rewind before we even started the show, listed as himself. This is a slight joke from the writers to the audience, letting us know they know all the questions we have, and systematically throughout the entirety of this episode, one by one, they ask those questions. Why he doesn't look the same, if he has the same memories, and we'll get to those when they come up. Now, of course, the song lyrics to this theme song have been like the weeks past, explaining what's going on. The intro lyrics, don't try to fight the chaos, don't question what you've done later. They keep repeating, let's keep this going, let's keep this going. You never know who's going to show up and play. That's presumably pointing to whomever is behind this predicament in the first place. Now, I absolutely loved the first act because it went a long way in explaining a lot of comic accurate costumes that have no place in the modern MCU, set them during Halloween to explain why they'd be wearing them in the first place, and then even poked fun at some of them, well, that deserved poking fun at. Right off the bat, we have Wiccan's costume. He's dressed in exactly what he wears in the comics, almost to a T. Of course, he teases his brother, but his brother is wearing green like he wears in the comics as well. We then get the Scarlet Witch vintage costume. She explains it as a Sokovian fortune teller. Then we get Vision coming down the stairs in a costume so hilarious they had to make fun of it, and one that would have never found its way into the MCU except for this exact occasion. Now, there are two huge X-Men X-Force Weapon X Easter eggs in this very first act, but before we get to them, and because it's tied to this, we have to talk about the introduction of Pietro. Now look, Marvel knows this is our first look at the character since the huge reveal at the end of episode 5, and look at how they chose to set him up immediately via dialogue, letting us know he slept until 4:30. He then plays with the kids, and when Vision says, quote unquote, good with children, he's insinuating immature. If you think about Aaron Taylor Johnson's portrayal of Quicksilver during Age of Ultron, who this is supposed to be, he was a bit of a cut-up, but he wasn't like this. During this episode, Evan Peters really reminded me of Michael Keaton's portrayal of Beetlejuice in the way of how brash he was and how rude he was. That wasn't what I remember out of Quicksilver, but obviously we'll get a little further into this during the episode. Now, the reason we had to bring this up is because while Quicksilver is shotgunning a soda with the kids, in a blink and you would have missed it moment, because you only get the full name for 1 or 2 frames, the name of the cola is Kane. There were only 1 or 2 Kanes in the entirety of the Marvel Universe, one of which a complete unnotable. This is an Easter egg for none other than Garrison Kane, an original member of Cable's mercenary team, the Six Pack, who when he loses his arms and legs, ends up right beside Wade Wilson Deadpool in the second installment of the Weapon X program under Canada's Department K. Yes, all of the Wolverine, all of the Weapon X. This is a huge X-Force Easter egg, and of course an Easter egg for Deadpool as well, which we know we're getting sooner than later in the MCU, and the reported future of the franchise after Deadpool 1 and 2 was an X-Force film. Now, regardless of its connection to that, I love how subtly they put this in. You were for sure to miss this, at least a lot of people were the first time. However, the exclamation point that no one would miss is when Vision says all that stands between the trees and the toilet paper is the neighborhood's watch, and then puts his arms in the clear shape of an X. I really liked that. You might have missed the Kane Easter egg, but you weren't going to miss this from Vision. Now, the only other thing I want to touch on before we move on in the episode is when Wanda turns around, she is super startled by Pietro standing behind her. Actually, more than startled, she's terrified. The way she screams, the way she looks, the way the guitar hits, makes it feel like she has seen something quite different than the face of Evan Peters, which is what we see when the camera finally cuts. It is my hunch that we're going to get to see this moment again, much in the same way we did in the interaction between Wanda and Vision. We're going to get to see what she saw in that moment, and I guarantee it's not going to be Evan Peters' face. Now, jumping directly into the next scene, there is a ton of loaded dialogue here, packed into just a couple of sentences from director Hayward, but it's also important to note that this is the moment where the indelible descent into Jerk turned into him finally becoming an actual enemy and not an ally of Monica Rambeau. He, of course, insults her in front of the crew, demotes and fires her alongside Jimmy Woo and Darcy Lewis. This is important, and remember this moment because it's going to come back to bite him later in the series. Now, the first thing that he says, which is super indicative and actually holds double meaning, is when he says, if we take out Wanda, we end this nightmare right now. First of which, the word nightmare, extremely poignant considering if Mephisto is not the villain, he is the second up most likely villain for this scenario and the originally reported villain for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It's probably also worth mentioning in this moment, as it's been said by a lot of people before, there are certain places in the world that wouldn't even allow the devil to be the villain in a film. On top of that, can you imagine a family-friendly company like Disney finally releases a Marvel show on their Disney Plus streaming service, and the main villain is the devil? All that being said, there is a chance that it's nightmare, and if it is, then that word is meant to hold double meaning. It also makes it sound, the way he says it, take Wanda out and we end this nightmare now. The nightmare for whom? The townspeople? Or for you? Like, he's behind it, set this thing in motion, it is way out of his control, and he just wants to end it now. Now, the second huge piece of loaded dialogue, again in back-to-back sentences from director Hayward, is when he says, quote, always advocating on behalf of superpowered individuals, and then smirks and says, yeah, I know your history with Carol Danvers. The first of which, this is setting up the attitude of the government, agencies like S.W.O.R.D, towards enhanced individuals that will eventually become mutant kind in the MCU, leading to the perfect narrative and situation for the X-Men, how they create Sentinels, how they're against mutants, how society will eventually come to see them as villains. And as I've said in the past, when you have quote-unquote superheroes or Avengers like Wanda Maximoff is supposed to be, blowing up the side of buildings and killing civilians or mind-controlling entire towns, then it's sort of easy to see how a public opinion can change from wanting to get autographs and pictures with Avengers to all of a sudden seeing them as enemies of the state. It's also important to note this is building towards whatever we're going to see come to pass in Captain Marvel 2 in the history between Monica and Carol Danvers. Whatever happened there, they've been seeding Easter eggs for that in the entirety of the series. Now, jumping into the next scene, there are so many meta Easter eggs going on here, it's hard to count, so let's just go one by one. The first of which, we finally get Wanda asking Pietro point blank why he doesn't look the same, and his answer here is super important because it's what he does in the entirety of the episode. Whenever Wanda has a question for him, he immediately turns it on Wanda. In this case, he says, you tell me. It's probably because you don't want to be reminded of the past. In the intro to the episode, when they share that multiverse memory of getting a fish while trick-or-treating, she says she doesn't remember it that way. He says, well, you're probably just suppressing old trauma. Later in the episode, he brings it up again. He's always turning it on her in a way that sort of implies or implicates that he does know what's going on, only because he always has an answer for everything at the ready. Although I do admit that later in the episode, when they're in town in the absence of the kids, he does a great job of selling that he is actually her old brother Pietro, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, in this mismatched body. Speaking of which, in one of the most meta Easter eggs in the entirety of this series is when they go off to get candy, he says, kick-ass, she replies, kick-ass. Now, Kick-Ass is a Marvel comic that was turned into a movie directed by Matt Vaughn, starring Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kick-Ass with Evan Peters as his best friend. Again, this is a Marvel comic as well, turned into a film. Even more meta than that, that same director, Matthew Vaughn, who directed Aaron Taylor Johnson and Evan Peters side by side in the Marvel franchise movie Kick-Ass, also directed X-Men Days of Future Past, which of course featured Evan Peters as a version of Quicksilver. It is literally all the Easter eggs at once, all the crossover you'd ever want, and the perfect dialogue woven into the scene to reference all of this, considering what's going on with the swap of Aaron Taylor Johnson and Evan Peters in a situation where they're both playing Quicksilver in a different Marvel franchise. Bravo to the writers on the scene. It was really well done. Either way, there is some more loaded dialogue throughout the scene. Herb implies that he is actually part of what's going on behind the scenes too. We know that from earlier dialogue with Agnes. It just seems like he's able to do something for her when she seems upset. He asks if he can change something. She also finds out Vision is not actually on the neighborhood watch, but rather in a sort of quest to get to the edge of town. Now, we have to talk quickly about that Yo Magic commercial because I actually got some questions in DMs about what that commercial meant. It was an allegory and metaphor for what Wanda was feeling. Wanda, she said she felt forever lonely, endless emptiness. She's the one stranded on the island. As that claymation character said, desperate. It's a sort of mashup of a Yo Play, Yo Magic commercial. That's what's in there, and as well as those old claymation brisk tea commercials. What this is meant to imply is the shark, who is typically a predator, gives someone who's desperate something and says it'll help them, but really they can't control it, they don't have a handle on it, and ultimately it leads to their demise. More than just magic being dangerous and there being consequences, that shark's the predator, she's lonely on the island, and she's willing to take whatever handed to her that will seemingly help her emptiness and loneliness. Now, the next huge group of clustered Easter eggs come when Darcy finally hacks in to Tyler Hayward's personal devices. First of all, we see a ton of medical files, all of which are letters and numbered call files. Then you have one name, Ray Johnson, and Monica Rambeau. No, the alias Ray Johnson does not immediately tie to a Marvel or MCU character, but I'm sure with a little work we can crack that code. We're going to do a deep dive later in the week, maybe even later today, on what all these medical files could be. However, we do find out that Monica, having come and gone now inside the anomaly as she passed through twice, that sort of energy field is rewriting her cells on a molecular level. We hear this said, and she of course comes back with, I've seen enough charts, metastasized, remission. She's talking about her mother's cancer. I have an inkling that she actually picked up her powers long before these episodes. I think there was some dialogue early when she met Director Hayward. She was talking about being followed by drones, asking if this was because, and then she stopped short of saying it. I don't think it's because she was snapped. Later, when they said they have to do more medical records in the second episode when she finally comes out from the anomaly, she says she's done with that and she doesn't need anymore. That's because she doesn't need to know. I think something has already happened with her, and that's why she's not concerned about it. Either way, whether my hunch is right or not, this is definitely leading to her becoming a superhero, a member of the Avengers, either under the alias Photon, as they implied with the dialogue in the last episode, or maybe the name Spectrum, as she has taken in the comics before. This is what's going on with her. This is going to be the source of her power, perhaps the radiation in the force field created by Wanda, which again would just be a manifestation of what's coming originally from the Mind Stone. Now, the rest of this episode goes by really fast. We get reveals from Quicksilver that he sort of knows the nuance and details behind what's going on in this town and admits that he's not mad, he's impressed. That sort of made me feel like he was sort of evil at heart too. Again, perhaps the villain, but then he asks how she did it as if he doesn't understand, and I think that's a point that really sold it to a lot of us, that if he didn't know how she did it, this might actually be her brother. Now we finally see a manifestation in both Wiccan and Speed's powers. Wiccan's powers look awfully cool, even though we only got a little glimpse of it when his hand glowed blue. He could hear what was going on with Vision, and it appears as though when Vision finally made it through the barrier, if he was going to remain outside, her magic of resurrecting him, or whatever was going on with keeping him alive inside the barrier, was no longer present, and he immediately curled up as if he was going to die in the same way that he did at the end of Infinity War. She then shows an amazing display of power and just basically makes the hexagon much bigger to encompass Vision, not letting him leave, turning that whole part of town into a circus, including Darcy Lewis. Now, there is a ton to speculate as to what's going on with their power, again, what's going on with the hexagon, if Tyler Hayward did actually set this all in motion, as he keeps to seem implying, and still who the villain is. But given where this episode went already, you now know that, well, S.W.O.R.D's main team that they put on the ground outside of this anomaly has been taken out. So whatever level threat she was before, wherever it ranked, is going to be basically cat out of the bag scenario. And this is where I think you call in the big guns, aka Doctor Strange. So I would be very surprised if not the next episode or the one after that, they finally call in someone with some real power who can handle something like this to actually go there. The only other huge Easter egg now, we know that that mysterious aerospace engineer is a him. Some people had speculated that it might have been Riri Williams Ironheart, maybe even that small Skrull child, but it seems like maybe the people speculating this is Reed Richards might have it right. We should see so next episode. Guys, let me know all your thoughts down below. I want to hear your theories, Easter eggs we missed, and of course, we are going to do a run back, deep dive on all of the huge details, including those file numbers, and try to figure out what is going on with all of this. Guys, let me know all your thoughts down below, and quickly, let's get into the giveaway stuff before I let you go. We're still giving away a PlayStation 5 at 800,000 subscribers, which we are headlong into and could easily hit by month's end or next. We're also giving away Disney Plus subscriptions weekly to tons of viewers while all of the shows are live this year. In fact, let's announce a brand new winner now. The Nancy Drew fan, congratulations for your comment here. I'm so excited for the next episode, the best part of my week. Go ahead and DM me on my Instagram at IamFires or get to me on the business email linked on the About section of this page. We'll verify your account and get the subscription right out to you, and it's that easy. If you want to be entered to win any of the future prizes here at the channel, all the same rules will always apply. Hit the subscribe button, then leave a comment down below, and because it's truly random, the more videos you comment on, the better chance you have of winning. All winners will be announced and selected at the end of the videos the same way we did here. The best way to keep up with the content at the channel is to hit the notification bell with notifications turned on, and of course, if you enjoyed today's video, I'd appreciate it if you hit the like button. My name's Michael Roman. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram under IamFires, and you can find me on Spotify with original music under All Fires. Guys, thanks so much for checking out the channel, and stick around. We'll be posting again real soon.